Hi, everybody, and welcome to this month's Lunch and Learn session in our Building Blocks of Green Building webinar series on the second Tuesday of the month at 12 noon Eastern Time. Today is September already, so here we go. Last month, we toured an FGBC Platinum rated home with the homeowner who designed it and had the house built in 2010. Today, we'll be talking about water efficiency in your home and your landscape. With so much in the news about water shortages and tainted water, efficiency and clean water are becoming even more important. On behalf of our sponsor, the Florida Green Building Coalition, or FGBC as we all call it, I would like to thank you for joining us today for Blue Can Be Green, Water Efficiency in the Home and Landscape. If you've missed any of our previous webinars or would like to watch them again or share them, just go to youtube.com and type in Florida Green Building Coalition to view any of the past webinars, videos. There's lots of information on there. So while you're there, please do us a favor and subscribe to our channel as well. Also, when you want to ask questions of the speaker today, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, and our speaker will go ahead and address all of your questions at the end of her presentation. So don't forget to use the Q&A box for the questions, and also go ahead and introduce yourself to others and use the chat box to chat with other attendees and make comments or share any comments. So we'll move on to Florida Green Building Coalition is the leading certifier of high performance homes, both new and remodeled, multifamily complexes, high rises, commercial buildings, local governments, and communities throughout Florida. FGBC has more than 26,000 certified projects. What makes the FGB rating so good is that the rating criteria is based on Florida's hot and humid climate. If living greener is one of your passions, like myself and all the other people that are members of FGBC, and you would like to volunteer on any one of our committees or just support our organization's efforts, we have several low-cost membership categories, and we would definitely welcome your input in any of our committees. I have been a volunteer since 2008, and I just keep learning more and more about healthy and sustainable building. My name is Jeannette Moore, and I'm the chair of FGBC's Realty, Appraiser, Builder Outreach Committee and a board member. I am also the real estate broker of Green Florida Properties in St. Augustine and an instructor of the Green Designation course for the National Association of Realtors. Our guest speaker, Deirdre Irwin, is the Water Conservation Coordinator for St. Johns River Water Management District. With almost 30 years of experience at the district, she has worked with the agency's Surface Water Regulatory Program, Water Resource Education Program, Certification Program Development, and Water Supply Planning. Her work as the Florida Water Star Coordinator and Water Conservation Coordinator involves administering the Florida Water Star program and assisting with training and outreach for the program. Deirdre is also a volunteer with Florida Green Building Coalition and one of our valued board members. Welcome, Deirdre, and thank you for taking the time to talk to us about such an important natural resource and what we can do to be more efficient.
Thank you, Jeannette. I am going to go ahead and share my screen. That was a great introduction, and hopefully I can share a lot of information today about water conservation and why it's important. So, like Jeannette said, I am the water conservation coordinator for St. John's, and I've been there forever, over 30 years now, but this work I find very fulfilling and rewarding. So just a couple of slides about who we are and why water conservation is important before we get down to the nitty-gritty for your home and landscape. The St. John's district is one of 5 water management districts in the state of Florida. Interestingly, they are set up by hydrologic boundaries, not political boundaries. So the St. John's district is actually the hydrologic basin of the St. John's River. So we manage everything within the basin. As South Florida, it's the Kissimmee River and the Everglades. So it's a very important way to manage a natural resource is to have the entire boundary in your area. So one of the things we do is every year we do a water use report based on all of the permits we've issued and all of our data that comes in every year on how much water is being used. We produce this pretty lengthy report describing who's using the water. So here's a snapshot from 2020. This just came out in the last few weeks. And for the first time that I've observed in these reports, we've actually gone to a higher, we've gone over the 1,000 million gallons per day. As has been the trend in the last few years, the blue category is the utility water use, and that has been increasing. We're at about approximately 53% is utility water use. The green area is agriculture, our other big category of use. And I will say ag can expand in a very dry year. Over the past few years, it's been quite wet, so agriculture is using less water. Those other categories, domestic self-supply is basically people who have their own well water, and that's only about 7% of our water users. So for today, much of what I'm going to talk about is water conservation as it relates to utility or public water supply. One of the other important things we do and why quantifying water use is so important is that we are legislatively mandated to come up with regional water supply plans, basically figuring out where's the water going to come from for a region within our district. And we do that when it is clear that that area is going to struggle or is being constrained in water supply from our traditional source, which is the Floridan Aquifer. So these reports are really important because they tell us how much the area is likely to grow population-wise, how much water will be needed, and where is that water going to come from. And every time we do these plans, we talk about conservation and the importance of efficient use of water. We also talk about what we call alternative water sources. If the aquifer can no longer be our primary source and support us, where else might a utility get water from? So the most common options are reclaimed water, brackish groundwater, which would be groundwater that has somewhat of a salt content, then that's treated, surface water, rivers and lakes. And then we also consider conservation as an alternative source, because not using water can delay the need to go to these alternative, much more expensive alternative sources. The other thing most of you are probably aware is we permit water use. So every large user of water beyond 100,000 gallons per day has to get a permit from the district. They have to demonstrate that they're using the water feasibly and that they are conserving as much as possible. And part of that process is actually putting together a water conservation plan showing how they plan to conserve water. The big permits, like the utilities, have to submit reports every so often showing how they're meeting that water conservation plan, and that's part of what I do in my job. So anytime you see a utility out there encouraging water conservation, maybe with a demonstration garden, webinars, outreach, rebate programs, that's all because they have to do that as part of their water use permit. And as water supply is becoming more constrained, conservation is ramping up, and we are becoming a lot more diligent and focused in these plans and how well they're being implemented by a utility. One of the other things we do, and this is kind of the better news stuff, is every year since 2014, we have had a cost share program. That means that applicants can apply to us for help in doing their water conservation or going to an alternative water source. There's several categories, but for the purposes of today, I'm going to talk about the cost share funding for water conservation. So we commonly see agriculture coming in for that money. Here you can see more efficient methods for applying water in the Gulf in a sod field. Golf courses apply, utilities apply. We have several utilities who come to us for funding and then offer rebate programs. They cost share, they pay half, we pay half, and the homeowners or their customers can then get maybe smart controllers, better irrigation. Toilet rebates are a really popular one. Where toilet rebate, well, I'll talk about those in a minute. I could talk all day about rebate programs. So we do have money. We try to help our partners, any kind of partner in conserving or in cleaning up water using reclaimed or the like. So a snapshot, you remember the other pie chart showed us who's using the water, and it was utility water use is the largest category. When we look at residential water use, if the home has an in-ground automatic irrigation system, we are seeing at least 50% of that water going outdoors for irrigation. Indoors, we see the top 3 water users are toilets, faucets, and showers. Followed up by clothes washers. Leaks are very common. We see a lot of leaks in residential water use. And the smallest category, and oftentimes the most surprising, is dishwashers. Dishwashers over the years have become very efficient, so they use a lot less water. So of that outdoor water use, it is very common that half of it is being wasted because it's an inefficient system that's being either is running for too long or being run too frequently on the irrigation system in the landscape. So let's talk a little bit. I keep mentioning these alternative sources of water, and I've mentioned reclaimed surface water. Well, here is the reason why conservation is more attractive to a lot of our utility partners and agriculture. Water conservation is relatively cheap. It is education, behavior change, outreach to use less water. The minute we transition from using our aquifer water use to, which is our current water supply in the $1.50 per 1,000 gallons, the minute we go to some of these other sources like reclaimed, lower Floridan, that is actually, if you think about Florida as a layer cake, there's the surface, the icing where we live, there's the Floridan aquifer underneath. Well, beneath that, there's an even deeper aquifer. That's called the lower Floridan aquifer. And that is in many areas a very valid or viable source of water, but it is significantly more expensive to get it and to treat it. Same with brackish groundwater, that is high salt content from the aquifer, maybe the superficial aquifer. In an area or over by the coast, the aquifer water can be brackish, and that costs a lot more. But right now, the biggest, most expensive source is seawater. A lot of people think, well, we've got lots of water in Florida. Why don't we just do reverse osmosis from ocean water? Well, as you can see, it can be terribly expensive. I think in time, those costs will go down. And once we figure out reasonable ways to use solar to treat water, it will become a viable alternative. You may have seen a campaign that launched a few weeks ago called One Florida Water. There is an increased emphasis in the state at looking at reclaimed water, all of our sources, and making reclaimed water available for potable uses, treating it to an even higher standards. But we're in the early days of that being a viable option, but it is being explored. So let's talk a little bit then about water conservation in our homes And a lot of this information could carry over to commercial, but we're going to talk primarily about residential. So I'm taking a lot of the information from the Florida WaterStar program because it's well researched, it's been documented as it works, and we've had a certain amount of success implementing the criteria. So I will kind of follow along with the suggestions from that program. So WaterStar, just you've heard us mention it, it is a program owned by the St. John's District. It's available statewide. South and Southwest Florida water management districts are partners in the program. And about 4 years ago, we partnered with the Florida Home Builders Association, who help us in administering the WaterStar program. It is basically water conservation, primarily voluntary, but in some areas there are incentives and even requirements to build to this standard in areas where water is more constrained. So let's start in the bathroom. I think everybody is aware at this point that toilets have changed over the last few years. It's no longer possible to buy those big old tank toilets, the 3.5 gallon toilets. On the market now, any new toilet is going to be at least 1.6 gallons per flush, but it might even be lower. Florida Building Code requirement is 1.6. So any new home built in the last 20 years is going to have a 1.6. The older homes might have 3.5 gallon toilets. High efficiency toilets are considered 1.28 gallons per flush, and this is the category that is labeled by WaterSense. The EPA WaterSense program actually labels upon certain criteria water efficient plumbing fixtures. So a WaterSense toilet is going to be about 20% less water use. There are, however, a segment in the marketplace of toilets called ultra high efficiency toilets, and the common water use of those, also labeled by WaterSense, is 0.8 of a gallon per flush. 50% less water than building code. I've installed one of these in my home, and they work. They're extremely water conserving. The design is very different. A question I get a lot that I just wanted to mention is people ask me, well, can I put a device in the toilet tank to take up space so my toilet is more efficient? That's really not recommended, because toilet tanks and bowls, especially the bowl, are designed for a certain volume of flow to get all of the waste down the pipe. So if you change the capacity in the tank, you're going to have problems with performance. So that's why you kind of need to buy a new toilet. So it's designed, especially these 0.8 of a gallon per flush, are designed to really move water efficiently out of the bowl. The other piece of this to be aware of for performance is a standard called UNAR MAP rating. It's the performance of the toilet in terms of grams per flush. And I think I can let your imagination come up with what that means, but it's basically how effective it is. So to be a WaterSense toilet, they have to be able to flush 350 grams per flush. If you're really interested in looking closely at toilets, I would suggest going beyond 350, and you can Google UNAR MAP rating, and you can get a list of toilets and it'll tell you the grams per flush. I would go in the 500 to 800 grams per flush, to be honest, is what we recommend. That's the 350 is for the WaterSense label. So moving on to faucets and showers. Simple, easiest way to save water in the home, especially, is the faucet. So let's look at those first. Florida Building Code requires that lavatory faucets are 2.2 gallons per minute. Low flow versions of these for WaterSense labeling is 1.5. We frequently see them at 1 gallon per minute. And then they have aerators, so the water is coming out pretty fast under pressure. So it feels about the same amount, but it's significantly more water efficient. An easy tip, if you don't want to go out and buy new faucets, you can always go underneath the sink. You can find the shutoff valve for your faucet and just give it a quarter turn are to your liking, and you can see the water reduction dropping without purchasing any new faucets. Showers are a little more tricky. The shower flow rate is 2.5 gallons per minute, and people complain bitterly about that. People like their showers, they want pressure. I will say the WaterSense label quantity is 2 gallons per minute. It's not that much less, but it does save quite a bit of water. And the new shower heads are able to just really give a better feel, or the water comes out under pressure, it's aerated, and they're a lot better than the first generation of low flow shower heads, which we hear all the time were not very popular. I will say though, if you're someone who that shower is very important to you, maybe focus on other parts of your home to save water. There's lots of ways you can do it. So don't feel you have to punish yourself and have a dribble of water, but do explore these new low flow shower heads. Moving on then, one thing I should mention with faucets. We do not include the kitchen faucets as a standard area for water efficiency. If you think about using water in your kitchen, you're oftentimes filling a pot. And if it was super low flow, it would take a lot longer to do those things. There are some new available kitchen faucets that are low flow because they have aerators and the water comes out under pressure, but that's just a consideration. Not everybody wants to change their kitchen faucet. And moving on to appliances then, they are not labeled by WaterSense. They are labeled by Energy Star because they're electrical devices. But back around, I think it was 2011, the Energy Star programs added water efficiency so that these devices save you energy and save water. And anytime you save energy, you actually secondarily save water because of the water involved in producing energy. So the new standard, it's hard to believe how far they've come for dishwashers in 2020 is 3.2 gallons per cycle for an entire cycle of the normal cycle for your dishwasher. So it's very highly efficient. Clothes washers have also come a long way. In the early days of WaterStar, we were looking at 8-9 gallons water factor, but the highest standard to date was set in 2018 by the Energy Star program, and that is 4.3 gallons of a water factor. Because clothes washers come in different sizes with different kinds of cycles, we use the term water factor. It is the gallons per wash cycle divided by the cubic feet of the basin. So it's a quantity capacity calculation, and 4.3 gallons, highly efficient. It used to be, if you think back to that pie chart, the second highest user in the house was the clothes washer. And now it's like number 4 or even number 5. And that's all because of these high efficient clothes washers that are on the market. So lots of options for inside your home and different ways of saving water. Another way you can think of that's free is actual just behavior change. Recycling your water whenever you can, collecting water in the shower for use in other purposes, just turning off the faucet. So a lot of this is behavior driven. We like to educate children in particular because once adults have a habit, it's really hard to change habits and to reduce that water use. So we really like to teach children a lot of these behaviors. So let's move to outdoors. You'll remember I said that outdoor water use is essentially our low-hanging fruit. We use way too much water outdoors, in part because of automatic irrigation systems. For any of you who grew up in Florida, you were probably what we like to call hose draggers. You probably had bahia grass, a chain link fence, and bahia grass, and you dragged a hose around and watered only when it was very dry. These systems, while very convenient, use so much water, and they are not managed correctly. They're frequently not installed correctly, and as a result, we're using twice as much water as we should in actuality. It's important to keep in mind that Florida gets about 50 inches of rainfall per year. St. Augustine grass can thrive on 50 to 60 inches per year. But with our watering habits, we're giving it over 100 inches per year. And that can result in pests and all of this. So the first thing to start thinking about is water-wise landscaping. Another word for Florida-friendly landscaping, same concept. You choose plants that are appropriate for your landscape. You reduce that amount of irrigated turf grass. You preserve any existing vegetation if possible, like the tree in that lower picture, and you increase your shade. Turf grass that has no shade will use water up, evapotranspire water much more efficiently. When there is shade, that evapotranspiration reduces and turf grass uses or needs less water. We have a database on our website. You can just Google Florida Water-Wise Database. That it has search parameters you enter. Enter just a few, because if you enter all of them, your list is very short. When you hit enter from your search area, you get a long list of plants. Their common name, scientific name, what they are, where they grow, what range, soil needs, soil moisture needs, light needs. And then you can click on any one of those and get this nice one-page document that describes this plant. You can print it and take it to the nursery where you're buying your plants, or you can just look it up on your phone. So it's important to do your research if you're planning to change your landscape. Be sure you're buying plants that are suited for the sun, the soil type, the location that you're in Florida, and how much water they need. And perhaps natives. I'll speak more about natives shortly, native species. But let's talk about the number one water use area that we have, the irrigation system. At the outset, I always like to state that Florida has no design standards, statewide requirements for irrigation. They are only briefly mentioned in the Florida Building Code because they're not part of the structure. They're outside. So there is no standard. There are lots of recommendations. The industry itself is very engaged in trying to get design standards mandated for irrigation so that it's installed more efficiently. And it goes without saying that the cheaper the system, most likely the more poorly it's designed and installed. A good irrigation system will probably cost a little more money because it's putting in more sprays, more rotors, and it's following some best management practices that are highly recommended. So let's dive into this a little more. So like I've said repeatedly, in-ground irrigation systems use and waste a lot of water. An efficient system depends on a good design, good installation, and frequent maintenance. That's the trifecta for efficient outdoor water use. This next bullet comes from the University of Florida H2O Save, which is a tool that the university developed in partnership with utilities. And it's looking at thousands of customers of utilities across Florida. And between the period 2012 to 19, the average home was using 191 gallons per day of potable water from their utility. And even more fantastic, in a bad way, homes were using 381 gallons per day of reclaimed water. And that is because reclaimed is exempt from the irrigation restrictions. And I believe I have a slide coming up on those. That's why so much more is being used. Also, reclaimed is very inexpensive in some areas. Not in my utility, I'm with JEA, and they actually charge the same for potable and reclaimed. So we're seeing people leave their system in automatic, and that's how they waste water. What we noticed starting around 2007, 2008 during the recession, two things. We saw homeowners, in an effort to save money, turning off their automatic irrigation system and only turning it on as needed. We really liked that behavior. And then we noticed that a lot of new homes were built and left with the system turned on to establish new vegetation, and it stayed that way for a number of years, and tremendous amounts of water were wasted during that time period. So we work closely with utilities to make sure the system gets turned from being establishing a new landscape to what we called routine maintenance or routine irrigation practices. So a lot of water is being used. So let's go over some easy ways that you can save, either in new homes or older homes, and these apply to businesses too. So we do have statewide irrigation restrictions in Florida. For the St. John's district, I'll cover those. It's based on whether your address is odd or even, so know your watering days. So they change. In daylight savings time, you're allowed to water 2 days per week, and that's where we still are on your designated days. So my address is even, so I water Thursdays and Sundays. If your address is odd, it's going to be Wednesdays and Saturdays. So setting your timer up to run on these days will ensure that you're saving water right there. When the times change in November, and we go to Eastern Standard Time, we get 1 day a week. And this is perfectly adequate in the winter time to keep our landscapes healthy. Remember, it's on top of rainfall. So we still have rain during that period. Another thing we're doing to remind people of these irrigation restrictions is we have a campaign up and running at the district and reminding people to water less. And we give out these stickers. If you want one, reach out to me. We have magnets and we have clings to put on your controller to remind you of your watering day. So please reach out if you're looking for that. We also have put a lot of materials on our website for utilities to use, and I mean graphics, essentially this sort of thing. Many different shapes and sizes for social media so that utilities, homeowner associations can all share this on their websites. So it's free for the taking to help spread the message. So let's move to number 2. Check your sprinkler system to make sure it's working efficiently. So irrigation systems are not maintenance free. You should at least maybe every quarter turn the system on for 10 minutes and watch each zone run. Because if you think about it, when you use it is usually very early in the morning or late at night and you don't see it running. So look for leaks, look for sprinkler heads that might be crooked, aligned incorrectly, and go ahead and get those repaired. If you have an irrigation lawn maintenance company, ask them to do, this is called a wet check, ask them to do a wet check every quarter on your system. So you can see if you're, first off, have no leaks, make sure you're not leaking water. So here are some of the BMPs for design of a system, best management practices. So knowing your zones. So take a look at your irrigation system, turn on each zone. If you have a drawing of your lot, go ahead and draw out where those irrigation zones are. It's common to have between 4 and 6 zones is how the system is designed. A good irrigation system would not water turf grass and landscape beds on the same zone. Don't feel bad. Cheap systems or systems that don't have mandated requirements will probably water both in the same time. The reason we don't like to do that is turf grass and landscape beds need different quantities of water. Quite frequently, your bed, if it's established, doesn't need any water, occasional water, but your turf grass might need a little bit. So you should always separate out beds from turf. Head-to-head spacing. This term applies to the sprinkler heads. You can see those drawings in the center. The bottom one in the center is correct design. Water from one sprinkler head should throw all the way to the next head. They should not throw halfway. This is the #1 way where irrigation companies save money. They put in fewer heads and they stretch out that distance so that it's no longer head to head. And when you do that, you have what's called poor uniformity. So look at that drawing in the top right-hand side. A good system is putting water out evenly to the root zone of your turf grass. Poorly spaced heads will give you the result in the second picture, where one area is getting too much water, one area is getting not enough water. This is where you see dollarweed, fungus is in the area getting too much water. Because if you want to improve it for that dry patch, you have to water everything. So for the life of your system, having this head-to-head spacing can give you a much better, more attractive turf grass with less need for chemicals, for pests, etc., from overwatering. And then finally, the next, hold on, I've got one more bullet, pressure regulation. If your system, when you run it, if your spray heads look like this, to where it's really pretty and the water is atomizing up into the atmosphere, that means your pressure is too high. And it means that you're losing half the water to the atmosphere. So, and you're paying for that water. So you might want to keep it on the turf grass. There's a few solutions here. You can buy pressure regulation sprinkler heads, or you can buy a pressure regulator to put on your zone for that will regulate the pressure of that whole area. And if you're wondering how you'd know what pressure you should put, the manufacturers of all of these products have a recommended pressure, which is different for sprays and rotors. Depending on the head, it might differ. Okay, next simple tip, turn off your sprinkler system if there's rain in the forecast. So you are supposed to, and I think I have this, no, I'll mention it here. You are supposed to have a rain sensor on your system. It's required by Florida statute that every irrigation system have a functioning rain shutoff device. It's probably a small white rain sensor on the side of your house. In reality, these devices only work for about 2 years. So you might want to think about getting that repaired. If you have an irrigation company coming to do maintenance, they're supposed to test it for you and tell you if it needs to be replaced. And according to the statute, they're not supposed to do any work on your system until your rain sensor functions. I will say it's not strictly adhered to. Except when I hired someone, they were very aware of this rule and they did not work on my system until I let them fix my rain sensor. So I guess that's a good thing. So if you know your rain sensor isn't working and you can't get around to fixing it, just turn off the system. The past few years, between late May, early June, and October, we've had very frequent rainfall. So every time the rainy season starts, I turn off my controller. And as a result, this year, I think I've watered 3 times since May, because rainfall is adequate usually. And not every summer is like that, but we've been lucky in these last few years. Think smart irrigation technology. So I mentioned rain sensors, the devices that we're all familiar with, that are on the side of our house. Now there are some very sophisticated irrigation timers that have built-in rainfall shutoff. So there's 2 ways of doing that. A soil moisture sensor, they either sense the moisture in the root zone, or what we call weather-based. So they're taking atmospheric weather data from the cloud, from a weather company like I'm just blanking on the name. There's a number of them out there. It takes data for your area. It can even predict, with patterns, AI, whether or not you're likely to get rain, and it will adjust your watering accordingly. Very, very sophisticated devices. If you like to mess around with high tech, these would be very attractive to you. Most of them allow you to access your controller on your smartphone, so you can adjust or you can see how much you've watered. These are extremely effective devices if they're installed correctly and used correctly. Oh, I forgot I had this picture. So like I said, this one on the top right is the soil moisture sensor. These can be a little more tricky to install. You need someone who knows what they're doing, and you need to remember where it is and not cut the line. That I've seen that happen many times. The weather-based ones are a little more sophisticated with all sorts of new bells and whistles per se, where you can adjust your runtime based on the weather, or the machine does it for you. And then they allow you, both systems will allow you to look at your irrigation on your phone and adjust it. One of the audiences who like this, or customers who use it, are people who live here only part of the year. So usually in the winter, and they go back up north in the summer, they're able to adjust their irrigation based on weather from their phone. Very, very effective approaches. So then getting back to the landscaping component, the right plant, right place, or Florida friendly or water wise, whatever you choose to do. Some of the key tips there are keeping shade or adding shade, having a diverse number of species in your landscape to avoid and to minimize the turf grass, and if possible, include native species. Site-appropriate natives can be very beneficial. They attract wildlife, birds, food. They provide food and nesting opportunities. They attract pollinators like bees and butterflies. And they also, their adaptation benefits, they require less irrigation. If you're buying a native species that's already adapted to your soil type, you don't need to water it at all, most likely. And then they require fewer chemical inputs to keep them looking attractive. So I strongly encourage wherever you can, add natives to your landscape. So now let's go over some of the maintenance components of all of this. So I'm going to repeat myself, but water only when you need to. Ask for help. I'm going to share some resources with you shortly. Call me anytime and use the resources out there to help run your system correctly. Turn off that controller. Only turn it on when you need it. Ease into changing your landscape. I've seen a lot of people make mistakes by going in and changing everything and maybe not always doing the homework. So take it a piece at a time. And there are solutions even if you have a poorly designed irrigation system. If you're applying chemicals yourself, read all the instructions. If you're hiring a company to do it, be sure they have their license from the state of Florida to apply chemicals. To have that license, you have to go through a lot of training and workshops and CEU training. So be sure you hire someone who's qualified. Watch the weather, wait to water. Can you see a pattern here? I'm reminding you not to water frequently. And remember, insects are good. Learn about our beneficial insects and why they help our landscapes. Don't assume if you see a bug, it needs to be killed immediately. And then save and reuse grass clippings. So if you are doing your own landscape maintenance, those grass clippings really function as a kind of like a fertilizer. They have organic matter in them, and if they decay, they can add nutrients to the soil. Also leaves, oak leaves are great to use instead of mulch in your beds, and it's less waste leaving your landscape. And then enjoy your landscape. I think over the past 2 years, we've seen an awful lot of people get back into landscaping and growing vegetables. During the pandemic, was a great source of comfort for a lot of people. So here's some resources regarding the landscaping side of things. The Florida Friendly Landscaping Program has an excellent website. They have their Bmps, the 9 principles. They have a new training to a certification for landscape professionals to become Florida Friendly landscape professionals. And then there's just tons of information and tips there. There is also a Facebook page that our own Jeannette Moore runs for homeowners for Florida Friendly Landscaping, which is a fabulous place to learn and get tips and learn from others. The Florida Native Plant Society has a fabulous searchable database for natives. If you really get into natives, consider joining a chapter of the Florida Native Plant Society. They are throughout Florida, and you will learn so much from those experts. The Florida Water Star website has lots and lots of resources and detail. Everything I've talked about is in detail in this website. It's just floridawaterstar.com. Then the Waterwise Landscaping database I mentioned also has a very good glossary, lots of information on the philosophy of planting a site-appropriate landscape. And then finally, a tip that I have recently over the last few years started using on my phone is iNaturalist. So if you're not sure what plants you have or what a plant is when you're out hiking and you might think about growing it, this app is fabulous. You take a picture, you go open the app, take a picture, and it shows a list of plants that look like the one you just took. You pick the one that's most appropriate, and you can use it for insects, butterflies, for frogs, fungus, and plants. Great, great app to have on your phone. So a couple of other new devices that are out there. Technology is everywhere, and it's also in water conservation. Flume and Fin are similar devices. So the Flume is a device that's attached beside your water meter to your water main, and it is able to tell you how much water you're using at any given time. It can alert you if you have a leak. On your phone, it can text you. You can go on the app and see when you're using most water, how you're using it. Really fabulous app. The Flume website also has information on how water is being used all across the country. Fin is a similar device. It is teaches you about your water use, how it's being used, will alert you of leaks. And then something that I think we're going to see a lot more of in new homes down the road is grey water recycling. So Hydroloop is a new company to Florida that have a compact grey water recycling device. So it takes water from your shower and your bathroom faucet, and it runs it through this pressurized cleaning system, and it's used in the toilet for flushing. So it's grey water for flushing. So it can reduce the amount of water used in the house and recycle water too. I think we're going to see more of those. Some legislation passed this year that will encourage the use of these devices. So that is it from me. I see we have some questions. Peggy has seen a lot of folks complaining about folks watering during the rain. Can they coordinate with their HOA on mandating or using some of? Yeah, absolutely. If you work with an HOA, they are welcome to take all of our graphics, our information. Now, in your district, Peggy, you're in Southwest Water Management. They will want to double check that they're using the correct information on the irrigation restrictions. And get with me, and I can get you with the right person over at SwiftMud. Okay, I will send you the social media tips, the graphics. I'll send it to, actually, Jeannette, I'll send it to you, and if you'd send it to all the attendees, where that page is on our website.
That'd be great.
And then any tips on folks using the old-fashioned hose? We love hose draggers. They're our heroes. Trust me, if you've got to pull that hose around your yard, you will water less. There is discussion and some prototype subdivisions being designed right now to have no in-ground irrigation, to try to preserve as much of the natural landscape that's there, and no installed irrigation systems. And Peggy's also, yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm working down Peggy's questions. Lots of good questions here. Peggy mentions rain barrels. Rain barrels are not water conservation. They are alternative water supply. It's rainwater harvesting. Great idea. I will say a single rain barrel is not going to save you a lot of water compared to how much water in your irrigation system. What is it, 40, 60 gallons? And remember, we saw that you're using 120 a day quite frequently. So rain barrels are great for watering vegetables, herbs, and the like, but they will not replace your entire irrigation system unless you have a really large rainwater harvesting system, which they are out there. And I have lots of information on those on the WaterStar site.
Along those lines, Deirdre, you and I had a conversation about watering food, vegetables, and things with the rain barrel water. Would you bring that up again to everybody?
Absolutely. So, I picked this up from UF several years ago. They had a fabulous presentation about rain barrels. You are not supposed to use, it's not law, but it's highly discouraged to use rain barrel water on leafy vegetables, things that you eat straight away. Because if you think about that, rainwater is coming off your roof. And you might have birds, most likely have birds, squirrels and the like, who often defecate on the roof. And it is really common to have E. coli or fecal coliform in the water in a rain barrel. So you can get it tested, or you could put a teaspoon of bleach in once a week if you want to use that water on your leafy herbs. Or just don't use your watering can on top of the leafy part and put it straight down to the roots. If it goes to the roots, it'll be fine.
That's some great information, and I think that's some pretty important information. We had one question earlier that I just wrote a response to, but one of the attendees asked, what can be done to get the zoning codes changed that require grass in the front yards? There's a good one for you.
They are changing. You know, I've lost my Zoom here. Yeah, there we go. They are changing. I have a whole worksheet on a list of all the local governments that have already changed their codes. It's a patchwork across the state. They are frequently taking the water star criteria. Southwest Water Management District is actively working with smaller cities and counties in their region to get them to change the landscape design codes for new development to limit it to 60% turf grass or even 50%. My county, St. John's County, is 50% turf grass, and the rest has to be irrigated with micro irrigation. So it's happening. That's right. Kristen says we need to treat water as a luxury, not as a resource that will be here forever. Well, we'll always have water in Florida. It just won't be cheap. You know, people think we're going to run out of water. We're not. We're never going to run out of water in Florida. We're running out of the cheap water from our aquifer. We've been spoiled rotten with this fabulous source of clean, fresh water, and we have not always treated it appropriately.
That's very, very true. I mean, we need to treat it like a luxury. I like that, Kristen. We'll have to remember that. A question that I had is if you could address the use of gray water on, gray water and reclaimed are going to be two different types of water. So I know that in my neighborhood, they have reclaimed water from the golf course. Mm-hmm. And I see so many people watering their citrus trees, their gardens and everything, their vegetable gardens with this reclaimed water. And I wonder about the nutrients that are in there, mm-hmm. as well as how safe is it to use? I mean, I don't like using it.
Sometimes it can depend on the utility in particular, but from what I understand, reclaimed water is almost treated to almost potable drinking standards. But it isn't legally potable drinking standards. That's the law that passed this year. They are going to be treating it to an even higher standard. It's typically higher in nutrients like phosphorus and nitrogen. So if you're using it for your landscape, it's actually a good thing. You need less, if any, chemical applications if you're using reclaimed water, because it's already high in nutrients for the landscape. In terms of, they do recommend you use micro irrigation or not irrigate on top of your vegetables is a recommendation. I haven't actually heard of too many outbreaks of one of the common human diseases from poor water quality is Giardia. And in the early days of reclaimed water, there were a few cases, I know, in North Florida that I know of. But pretty much the utilities have done a really good job with reclaimed. It's better than putting potable water on our grass, I will say. And we're going to be seeing more and more of that in the future. Yeah.
Any thoughts on how the other problem with this reclaimed water is everybody in the neighborhood seems, in the whole area, not the neighborhood, but the whole area seems to think that they can go ahead and, many of them have their irrigation system's set on watering almost every day, which makes me crazy.
Mhm.
But what's a good way to educate them? I mean, you know, without getting shot.
You know, and just a little bit of background on why reclaimed water is exempt. You're like, you know, all of our sources are becoming more and more precious. So why are we exempting reclaimed? The utilities lobbied us heavily to make it exempt because they produce it constantly. And if it's not being used, they have to store it. And they would need vast storage tanks for reclaimed. That said, in Central Florida, we're seeing reclaimed being used up constantly. So they do restrict it. A utility has the right to restrict their use of reclaimed water. So I know Toho water, it's treated just like potable. You can only use it twice a week. It's sometimes they get so short of it, they manually turn off entire neighborhoods, don't have any to water. So
that's what they've been doing. And then, well, last year, you know, you had so many people watering daily that the water, I mean, there was just no water. They had to just shut it off and send out notices saying, you know, you can only water once or twice a week, you know, get your act together. But nobody, you know, they all have it set on automatic and nobody does anything.
And it's tricky with reclaimed. You're in city of St. Augustine Beach. They do not restrict reclaimed, and we're not allowed to. A law passed several years ago that said reclaimed water is a product. It's not a natural resource, and we're no longer allowed to restrict its use because it's like a manufactured product per se. It's taking wastewater and treating it to this standard, so it's not considered natural resources. So we have been removed from the picture of regulating its use.
Oh boy, that sounds wonderful. That sounds very
it's, you know, it is what it is. But we, in working with our utilities in getting their permits and these water supply plans, we're telling them now routinely, we no longer can allow you to take any water from the aquifer. If you need more water for the next 20 years, here's some ideas for alternative sources, because you're not getting it out of the aquifer. And those permits are getting tighter and tighter. In Central Florida, new water users cannot, you know, it's really difficult to get water from the aquifer. And the cities, as they're renewing their permits, they're having to look at some very expensive options.
Well, it's about time, honestly. So
yeah, maybe we should have been doing this a lot
20
earlier.
years ago.
The thing is with water, though, people, I almost feel like I do this all day, every day. I work with the other conservation people. It's almost like the faucets need to run dry.
Unfortunately,
for people to change. Behavior change is the hardest thing in the world to get people to do.
You're right. Oh, go ahead.
When people move here from other states and they see all these rainfall, they see lakes, they see wetlands and rivers, they're like, how could we possibly be short of water? So it's actually a really difficult message.
I know my neighbors say that, you know, we got loads of water, look around you. Yeah. Right. Yeah. So we have another question that came up. What water is being used for vegetable gardens? I know Babcock Ranch has several community gardens.
I think a lot of those, they either use a shallow well or they're hooked up to utility water. Not usually reclaimed. I don't think so. I'm not sure if that's allowed, actually. So the ones that I know of, they have a shallow well adjacent to the community garden, like the one at St. Augustine, St. John's County Community Garden, or they are using city treated water.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that looks like it for the questions. And I'll tell you what, my head is spinning with all this fabulous information you just gave today. I mean, I'm going to look at that iNaturalist app and all kinds of other things, as well as probably go door to door to my neighbors and suggest they water on their
Can
days.
I tell you one more thing for everyone?
Sure.
Last year we launched a CEU training that's free for HOA managers. They're called CAMs, Community Association Managers.
Right.
And we have had fabulous responses. We get 40 and 50 CAMs. It's a 1-hour CEU training that we offer once or twice. Like we have one on stormwater systems, irrigation, and conservation easements. And we've had huge turnout. Most companies, the bigger CAM management companies, now require all their staff to attend our training, and it's free. So if you're part of an HOA, ask your CAM or your community association manager if they've been through water management district training.
Oh, that's a good question to ask, and I will suggest that to others that ask me some questions.
I'll send you a link to that too, Jeannette, just so you have it, where that training is, and the link to our free resources.
And we'll put that on the follow-up to the webinar for everybody that attended. So thank you so much for all that great information. I mean, that was a fabulous webinar, and from the chat box, I could see other people thought so as well. So thanks again.
Thank you very much, Jeannette.
Oh, you're welcome.
These are great.
Thank you.
Take care.
You too. So we here at Florida Green Building Coalition are delighted that all of you chose to attend our Lunch and Learn webinar today, and hope you're leaving with some helpful information, whether you plan to build a home or remodel your existing home or change your landscaping even. Please join me next month, Tuesday, October 12th at noon, to hear Sandra Adamatis, who is now the Vice President of the Appraisal Institute and instructor for the course to certify appraisers to value high performance features. Her presentation should interest all of you who have solar panels or who are thinking about having them installed. We would really appreciate it if you could help us by completing the survey when you leave today's session, so we can plan future webinars based on what your interests are. So please do that when you sign out, and don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you, and I look forward to meeting with everyone next month. Bye-bye.